What if I told you that a young man who didn't even have a place to sleep would one day build one of the most admired luxury brands in history? Would you believe it? It sounds impossible, doesn't it? After all, when we think about legendary entrepreneurs and empire builders, we usually picture people who had opportunities, elite education, powerful connections, or some kind of advantage from the very beginning. But the story you're about to hear follows a completely different path. It begins in a world of hardship, uncertainty, and challenges that would have caused most people to give up before they ever got started. Long before he became known for his extraordinary vision and talent, he was simply a young boy trying to survive in a world that didn't seem to offer him many chances. His childhood was defined by financial struggles, instability, and a constant sense of uncertainty about the future. While other kids were dreaming about what they wanted to become someday, he was dealing with much bigger problems. Every day brought a new challenge. Every week seemed to introduce a new obstacle. Life didn't hand him an easy path. Money was always tight, resources were limited, opportunities felt out of reach, but even in the middle of those struggles, he developed a trait that would eventually change everything. He learned how to observe. He paid attention to everything around him, the people, the objects, the details that most others ignored. There was a natural curiosity inside him, as if he were constantly trying to understand how the world really worked. At the time, nobody could have imagined that this simple habit would one day become one of the foundations of his success. But before he could discover his true potential, life had even bigger challenges waiting for him. As the years passed, his situation became increasingly difficult. The hardships grew, the stability disappeared, and little by little, his reality began to unravel, until he reached the lowest point of all. Without money, without enough support, and without a safe place to start over, he found himself living on the streets. Overnight, everything changed. The nights became defined by cold, weather, and uncertainty. There was no comfortable bed waiting for him at the end of the day, no guarantee of a meal, not even the certainty of where he would sleep the next night. Imagine what that does to someone so young. While most people were going about their normal routines, he was focused on basic survival, finding shelter, undoing food, finding a way to make it through just one more day. The streets were unforgiving. The cold felt colder when there was no roof overhead. The loneliness felt heavier when nobody seemed to notice your existence, and the future felt farther away with every passing day. But something extraordinary began happening. During that period, while most people would have seen only suffering, he was quietly developing an unusual inner strength. Every hardship made him tougher. Every obstacle made him more determined. Every difficult day taught him another lesson about resilience. Without realizing it, he was building the mindset that would eventually transform his entire life. Because even when everything seemed hopeless, he refused to believe that this would be his story forever. Deep down, there was a small voice telling him that something bigger was waiting, something greater, something he couldn't see yet, and that voice was right. What he didn't know was that the very struggles that seemed to be destroying him were actually preparing him for a journey that would change his life forever. A journey that would take him from homelessness to building one of the most iconic luxury brands the world had ever seen. After finding himself without a place to call home, life became a daily battle. The challenges that once seemed difficult had suddenly become even bigger. Every morning brought a new problem. There was no stability, no security, and most importantly, no guarantee that tomorrow would be any better than today. For the first time in his life, he understood the true meaning of survival. While most people were making plans for the future, he had to focus entirely on the present. His biggest concern wasn't success, it wasn't wealth, it wasn't even ambition. It was simply finding a way to keep moving forward, getting a meal, finding a place to rest, making it through one more day. That alone felt like a victory. The nights were especially brutal. When the crowds disappeared and the city grew quiet, the loneliness became impossible to ignore. The cold felt colder, the fear felt heavier, and thoughts about the future became overwhelming. Many nights, he wondered how his life had reached this point. He would watch people walking home, returning to their families, going back to places where they belonged. It seemed like everyone had somewhere to go, everyone except him. It would have been easy to quit, easy to believe that this situation would define the rest of his life, easy to accept that his future had already been decided. But somehow, he found the strength to keep going. Maybe it was hope, maybe it was pride, or maybe it was simply a refusal to believe that his story was already written. Whatever the reason, one thing was certain: he wasn't ready to give up on his future, even if he didn't yet know what that future looked like. To survive, he began taking any job he could find. The work was often exhausting, sometimes repetitive, usually underpaid, but he never complained because every opportunity meant something. Far more valuable than money, it represented a chance to learn, a chance to meet people, chance to get one step closer to a better life. And while doing those jobs, he developed a habit that would eventually change everything. He watched, he observed, he paid attention, he studied how experienced professionals worked, how they treated customers, how they carried themselves, how seriously they took quality and craftsmanship. Without realizing it, he was receiving an education that no classroom could ever provide, the education of experience. Every mistake became a lesson, every setback became training. Every struggle strengthened his resilience, and over time, something inside him began to change. The hardships were no longer just obstacles, they were becoming teachers. Hunger taught him to value opportunity. Loneliness taught him self-reliance, uncertainty taught him courage, and the daily struggle taught him a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. The strongest people are not the ones who never face adversity. They are the ones who keep moving forward despite it. That realization changed everything, because during this period, he began to understand something important. Even without money, without influence, without resources, he still possessed something incredibly valuable: his ability to learn. And nobody could take that away from him. Nobody could stop him from growing. That mindset started separating him from others facing the same circumstances. While many people focused only on their problems, he searched for possibilities. While others gave up, he kept observing, learning, improving, growing. Without realizing it, he was laying the foundation for an extraordinary future, because the years of struggle, discipline, and perseverance weren't holding him back. They were preparing him for a discovery that would change his life forever, a discovery that would transform a young man fighting to survive into someone capable of building a legacy admired by generations. After years of struggling just to survive, he had learned some hard lessons. He learned resilience. He learned how to handle rejection. He learned how to find strength when everything seemed to be falling apart. But despite everything those experiences had taught him, something was still missing. He had developed endurance, but he still didn't have direction. He had survived, but he still hadn't found a purpose, a reason that could make sense of all the hardship he had endured. And it was precisely when he least expected it that purpose began to reveal itself. Through the odd jobs he took to survive, he found himself spending time around craftsmen, makers, and skilled workers, people who could transform ordinary materials into elegant, useful products. At first, it seemed like just another job, just another way to earn a few dollars. But for him, there was something fascinating about the process. While most people focused on the finished product, he became obsessed with everything that happened before it existed. He wanted to understand how an idea became something real, how raw materials became objects people admired, why some products instantly captured attention, while others were completely forgettable. The more he observed, the more curious he became. He spent hours studying the details, the materials, the textures, the finishing touches, the precision of every movement, the care that went into every stage of production. It felt as though he had discovered an entirely new world, and for the first time in years, he felt something other than the constant pressure of survival. He felt excitement, curiosity, a genuine desire to learn, and that feeling was powerful. Even after long days of exhausting work, his mind kept returning to what he had seen. He thought about the techniques, the craftsmanship, the tiny details that separated an ordinary product from an extraordinary one. Little by little, that curiosity began turning into something much deeper. Passion. Realized he had a natural eye for quality. He noticed things that other people overlooked, small design details perfect, proportions, subtle differences in functionality. He instinctively understood that great products needed to be more than beautiful. They needed to be useful, durable, meaningful. They needed to create a feeling for the person using them. That realization became a healthy obsession. Whenever he had the opportunity, he learned. He watched experienced craftsmen work, asked questions, absorbed every piece of knowledge he could find. And most importantly, he practiced relentlessly. He made mistakes, corrected them, started over, improved, then improved again. Many times, he spent hours perfecting a single detail. While others were satisfied with good enough, he was chasing something else entirely. Excellence, not because anyone demanded it from him, but because he demanded it from himself. Excellence was becoming part of his identity, and over time, people began to notice. The things he created carried an unusual level of quality. There was something different about his work. Something difficult to explain. Maybe it was the attention to detail, maybe it was the dedication, or maybe it was because every piece carried the story of someone who truly understood the value of opportunity. People could sense it. They could see that he wasn't just making products. He was putting a piece of himself into every creation, and that made all the difference. For the first time, he began to believe that he had finally found what he had been searching for. The uncertainty that had followed him for so many years slowly began to fade. Now there was direction. Now there was purpose. Now there was a dream, and for the first time that dream didn't feel impossible. The more his skills improved, the more his confidence grew. He no longer saw himself as someone simply trying to escape hardship. He began seeing himself as a creator, someone capable of building something valuable, someone capable of leaving a mark on the world. Without realizing it, he was taking the first steps toward an extraordinary transformation, because the talent he had just discovered wouldn't simply change his career. It would change his entire life, and very soon, that talent would begin opening doors he never even knew existed. Discovering his talent was only the beginning. Now he had to prove, to the world and to himself, that he could turn that talent into something real. And that journey would be just as challenging as everything he had faced before, because confidence alone doesn't pay the bills, passion doesn't guarantee success, and having a dream doesn't mean opportunities magically appear. He would have to earn every single one. The reality was still harsh. While his skills were improving, the world remained skeptical. No one was waiting to hand him a career. No one was offering shortcuts. Every opportunity had to be won through effort. At first, the jobs were small, very small. Simple commissions that attracted little attention. Many clients didn't know his name. Others weren't sure they could trust someone so young and inexperienced. But he approached every project the same way. To him, there was no such thing as a small job. Only opportunities, and every opportunity was treated as if it could change his life. While others rushed to finish their work, he did the opposite. He slowed down, focused on the details, reviewed everything multiple times, perfected elements most people would never even notice. His philosophy was simple. If someone trusted him once, he would make sure they never forgot the quality of his work. That mindset started producing results. His first clients were impressed, not just by the products themselves, but by the care behind them. The dedication, the craftsmanship, the obvious pride he took in every piece he created. People could tell this wasn't just a job to him, it meant something. And when someone delivers exceptional work, people talk. One customer recommended him to another. One commission led to another opportunity. One opportunity opened the door to the next. Slowly, something that once felt impossible began to happen. His reputation started growing. For the first time, he realized that people were beginning to recognize his name. But success brought new challenges. As more orders arrived, so did more responsibility. Clients became more demanding, expectations grew higher, mistakes became more expensive, and the pressure to maintain the same level of quality increased constantly. Many people would have slowed down, some would have settled for what they had already achieved, others would have chosen the easier path, but not him. Every new challenge became fuel. Instead of becoming comfortable, he pushed himself even harder. He studied new techniques, observed emerging trends, analyzed the work of experienced professionals, constantly searching for ways to improve. His goal wasn't simply to meet expectations, it was to exceed them. Year after year, that relentless pursuit of excellence started separating him from everyone else. People weren't choosing him simply because his work looked good. They chose him because they trusted him. They knew they would receive something crafted with care, something built with dedication, something created to the highest possible standard. That trust became his most valuable asset, more valuable than money, more valuable than equipment, more valuable than any material resource, because reputations aren't bought, they're built, and he had built his the hardest way possible, through consistency. Through discipline, through years of relentless effort. As his client list continued growing, he began meeting more influential people, successful people, demanding people. People accustomed to the very best, and to his surprise, they were impressed too. Every important client boosted his confidence. Every recommendation expanded his vision. Every success made the future seem a little clearer. He was no longer just building a career. He was building something much bigger, an identity, a reputation. Their philosophy centered around excellence, and it was during this period of growth that a bold idea began taking shape in his mind, an idea that refused to go away, an idea many people would have considered risky, an idea that had the power to change his entire life. If his creations were already winning people over, why not create something of his own? Why not build a brand that reflected everything he believed in, a brand that carried his vision, his values, his obsession with quality, his relentless pursuit of perfection? At that moment, he didn't yet know exactly how he would do it, but one thing had become clear. The young man who once fought simply to survive was about to take the most important step of his life, a step that would transform his name into a legacy. A legacy that would be remembered for generations. After years of building his reputation and earning the trust of increasingly demanding clients, he realized he had reached a crossroads. One path was familiar, safe, predictable. He could continue, working for others, slowly growing his career, earning a stable income and living a relatively comfortable life. There was nothing wrong with that path. In fact, many people would have chosen it. But there was another option, a much more difficult one, a much riskier one. The possibility of creating something of his own, something that carried his identity, something that reflected his vision, something that could outlive him. It wasn't an easy decision. Building a brand meant taking enormous risks. It meant investing time, energy, and resources into something with absolutely no guarantee of success. And he understood that better than anyone. After all, uncertainty had been a constant companion throughout his life. But he had also learned an important lesson. The greatest rewards often require the greatest acts of courage. And so, he made the decision that would change everything. He would build his own brand. From the very beginning, his vision was different from that of most entrepreneurs of his time. While others focused on selling more products, he focused on creating experiences. He didn't want people to simply buy an object. He wanted them to feel something when they used it. He wanted every creation to communicate quality, exclusivity, sophistication. He wanted his products to be instantly recognized for their excellence. To achieve that, he set standards that many people considered excessive. Nothing would be produced without careful inspection. No detail would be overlooked. No material would be selected simply because it was cheaper. Quality would always come first, no exceptions. That philosophy demanded more work, more patience, more discipline. But he believed it would be worth it, and he was right. The brand's first customers immediately noticed something different. The moment they held one of his products, they could feel it. The craftsmanship was superior. The materials felt exceptional. The details reflected a level of care rarely seen elsewhere. Everything seemed intentional, because it was. Every piece represented the vision of a man who understood the value of opportunity and knew that excellence is never an accident. Word began to spread. At first, only a small group of customers knew about the brand, but that group grew quickly. Influential people started taking notice. Business leaders began recommending his products. Satisfied customers returned again and again, and little by little, the company started gaining recognition. The growth wasn't overnight. There were obstacles, moments of doubt, periods when the challenges seemed larger than the resources available. But he was no stranger to adversity. The streets had taught him how to keep moving forward when everything seemed lost. Now that same determination was being applied to business. Whenever a problem appeared, he searched for a solution. Whenever he encountered an obstacle, he found a way around it. Whenever competition increased, he raised his standards even higher. That mindset transformed the company. Year after year, the brand continued to grow. New markets opened. New customers arrived. New opportunities emerged. What had once been a bold dream was becoming an extraordinary reality. But perhaps the most impressive part wasn't the financial success. It was the reputation the brand was building. People were no longer buying the product solely for their function. They were buying what the brand represented. Owning one of his creations became a symbol of taste, a symbol of quality, a symbol of prestige. The brand was becoming something larger than a business. It was becoming a statement, a symbol of excellence, a symbol of sophistication, a symbol of what can happen when someone refuses to accept the limitations imposed by their circumstances. And as the company reached new heights, he began to realize something even more profound. The dream no longer belonged only to him. The brand had become bigger than its creator. It was building an identity capable of surviving generations, an identity that would continue growing long after he was gone. The young man who once wandered the streets uncertain of where he would sleep the next night was now watching his creation earn a place among the most respected names in the industry. And as remarkable as that achievement was, the most powerful chapter of his story was still ahead. Because true success would not be measured by the size of the company he built. It would be measured by the legacy he left behind. A legacy that would inspire generations long after his own journey came to an end. Years had passed since the days when he wandered the streets not knowing where he would sleep at night. The young man who once fought simply to survive was now witnessing something that would have seemed impossible when his journey began. That small idea, built through hard work, persistence, and countless sacrifices, had become a true empire. His brand continued to grow. New generations discovered his products. New markets opened their doors. New customers experienced the quality and craftsmanship that had been the foundation of his company from the very beginning. But behind all that success, there was something even more valuable. His story, because while millions admired the size of the brand, very few understood what it had taken to build it. Few knew about the nights when he had nowhere to sleep. Few knew about the days when hunger felt stronger than hope. Few knew how, many times he had been forced to keep moving forward when everything seemed to be working against him. And perhaps that's exactly what makes his journey so inspiring. He wasn't born surrounded by opportunity. He didn't start with wealth. He wasn't handed an easy path. Everything he achieved was built one step at a time through hard work. Through discipline, through courage, and above all through an unshakable determination to keep going. Over the years, his story began inspiring people far beyond the world of business. Entrepreneurs studied his journey. Creators admired his vision. Young people facing hardships found motivation in his example. Thousands began to see his life as proof that your starting point does not determine your destination, because in the end, his greatest legacy wasn't the company he built. It was the message he left behind. A message that obstacles do not have to define your future. A message that adversity can become strength. A message that failure is not the end of the road. It's often just another step along the journey. His life proved that extraordinary dreams can emerge from the most unlikely places. It proved that talent can be discovered in the middle of struggle, and it proved that a single decision, to refuse to give up, can completely change the course of a person's life. Today, decades after the beginning of his journey, his influence is still alive. Not only through the products he helped create, but through the inspiration his story continues to provide. Because people may pass away, companies may evolve, time may move forward, but true legacies endure, and the legacy he left behind continues. To remind future generations of a simple but powerful truth: it doesn't matter where you are right now. It doesn't matter how many obstacles stand in your way. It doesn't matter how many times life has knocked you down. What matters is the decision to keep moving forward. The decision to believe in yourself when nobody else does. The decision to continue when quitting would be easier. The decision to turn challenges into opportunities. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of this entire story. The young man who once had nothing built something that would outlive generations, not because he was the richest, not because he was the most privileged, but because he saw possibilities where most people only saw problems. And who knows, maybe someone watching this video right now is facing challenges of their own. Maybe someone believes their dreams are too ambitious. Maybe someone feels like they started too late. Or maybe someone believes their current circumstances define their future. If that sounds like you, remember this story, because every great achievement begins the same way, with an ordinary person making an extraordinary decision. The decision not to give up. And sometimes, that single decision changes everything. If you enjoyed this story and want to discover more incredible journeys of perseverance, success, and transformation, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upcoming video. And now I'd love to hear from you. What was the biggest lesson you took away from this story? Let me know in the comments below. I read every comment, and I always enjoy hearing your thoughts and perspectives. And if this story inspired you in any way, share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. You never know when a single story can completely change someone's outlook on life. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. I'll see you in the next video with another extraordinary story that proves the biggest dreams can come from the most unexpected places.